I met Dan through Ron Cobb. Dan and Ron Cobb had been close friends for a long time. It was Dan who brought Ron Cobb in on Alien. And at one of Ron's many parties, I met Dan, we became friends, and I used to bring my artwork to Ron's parties just to get feedback on what I was doing. And what I didn't know at the time, that when I was doing this, Dan was assessing me as an artist and as a possible production designer for Return of the Living Dead. The first direction he gave me, he said, he did not want to do a Romero film. He said, our zombies are going to be different. They're going to be fast, and he says, I'm not afraid of zombies that shuffle. I can outrun a zombie that shuffles. As my friend Don Gloop put it, hey, if you can't outrun the mummy, you deserve to die. So Dan said he also had written the script. He said, you know how there are principal actors and principal characters in a screenplay? He says, I've written the script so there are principal zombies as well. And I want you to design these principal zombies so that they stand out and that they're unique from other zombies in other films, especially the Romero films. I started researching what corpses look like after a while. I looked at the mummies of Guanajuato, Mexico. I was familiar with them through the Ray Bradbury story, and I had a big book of photographs of those mummies. And then I have a tremendous love for the old EC comics, Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror. And so I looked at the Graham Ingalls and Jack Davis revivified corpses. And I looked at Bernie Wrightson's work. Bernie is a master at doing that kind of stuff. And so what I started designing was sort of an amalgamation of all of that, which took it very far away from the Romero zombies, which were basically pale makeup with rings around the eyes, and made our zombies a lot more elaborate. I think the first zombie I tackled was the Tar Man, and I showed Dan my first drawing, and his face just lit up. He says, that's it, man, give me a full body shot, front and back, and we will make it.
Tar Man, which you see right here, the production design on it was Bill Stout. He is a brilliant illustrator, very, very imaginative artist. So he basically produced the production designs of the face and the overall body look. This happens to be just a mock-up face. This is not the actual actor. This was designed as a preliminary just to get the director to sign off on the look of it. Now what we wanted with the Tar Man was the idea of flesh that was literally melting down off of the body. It was important that it have a sense of weight to it as well. So instead of the usual that costumes are made out of, which might be foamed latex or polyurethane foam or even slip latex, this entire costume was actually made of hot melt vinyl. We would take some hot melt vinyl, boil it until it melts into a liquid, throw in some color tints so it has a kind of a basic intrinsic ugly brown, green, gray color to it, and then pour it onto sheets of tin foil and allow these sheets to kind of drip downward. These would be wrapped around Alan's body to actually build a suit on him, drip by drip by drip. The skeleton coming out of the grave was the second major effect of mine to do. The concept on this was that it was so emaciated that there's virtually no organs, no substance to the body left. Suffice to say, it eliminates any possibility of being a human in any kind of a costume. But from the standpoint of a mechanical animation effect, it presented some very intriguing problems, because the easiest way to operate something like this is using cables that run up through the body and hook up into the various areas. But when the entire body cavity is virtually empty and open and transparent, you have almost nowhere to run the cables through. Now the cables in this case are actually coming up right through the spinal column, up into the head, to be able to hook in around and animate the mouth, the eyes, and I believe we had some eye motion, we had eye blink, and we had jaw movement. The groups of zombies were kind of crazy. The agreement going in was we're going to use those mummies of Guanajuato as the design concept. And I would produce a number of over-the-head masks that look like that, with the same agreed color scheme. First day we get on the filming, which I believe is outside of the science place where we have a mob scene of zombies. They bring in all the extras. We're putting all the masks on them, darkening around the eyes and sending them out there. But some of the extras that were sent over, there were two people, a man and a woman, who had very odd-looking faces. And Dan, the director, looked at these people and said, "Oh, they look great the way they are. Let's not put masks on them," which of course is humiliating for the people. But he said, just make them up. So basically, I took these two people and I did a bunch of purple and gray tones to make them look a little bit more dead, decayed, and such like that. Well, the director took one look at them and said, "I love it. I want all the zombies to be this way." Now, I'm contracted to do 40 or 50 zombies, and you can't, on a moment's notice, say, repaint the 50 masks. I didn't even have a setup to do it on set. And I wasn't set up in terms of makeup materials to do makeup on 50 extras with purples and grays. So I go back to the producer and say, "Excuse me, I can't work miracles like this. You want it, it's going to cost." And he said, "We haven't got the budget." Poof, gone. Isn't going to happen. So Dan did not get what he wanted because of a budget constraint. I have no doubt in his mind he somehow imagined that it's my fault that I can't work this miracle. But this was basically what we were dealing with all the way through the filming, is that Dan would fixate on a certain thing, and it would become so obsessive to him. He had an idea of what he thought was perfection, and it had to be perfect, and it was drop everything else, neglect everything else, let's get this perfect.
Dan is brilliant as a director. He's one of the most visual guys I've ever worked with. He made my job a lot easier. Sometimes he would even do his own little storyboards, and they were always crystal clear. In fact, I learned a lot about storytelling just from looking at Dan's boards. But he wasn't always socially sensitive to the way he should be handling both the crew and the actors. I think because he had this really powerful vision, sometimes he would forget to be nice. Dan wanted realism. We paid the extras $5 more if they would eat real brains. We went down to the supermarket and bought a whole bunch of calves' brains and brought them to the set. Boy, the second day they really started to smell bad. Because we shot during the summer, that summer heat. It's terrible.
Send more paramedics.
First, they would tear off my clothes.
Obviously, it was well known that she was going to be doing some nude scenes. About halfway through my preparation, I get a call from Graham where he says, "We're sending Linnea over. We need you to make another, quote, prosthetic for her." They had decided that they weren't sure what kind of a rating they would get if they were photographing her completely nude and we were seeing her from the front. So they sent her over to me and they said that she needs a, quote, privacy patch. It was basically intended to cover her in a small, modest way with a glue-on latex appliance. So she was sent over to me to do an impression of her in order to prepare this. Now here again, this is something that I wasn't paid to do. Aside from the preparation cost, is the fact that every single day on set, that's going to take one makeup artist half hour, 40 minutes to glue it and make it up and everything else like that. That's more work that was actually put onto my crew that we had never budgeted for. The yellow zombie was pretty much a disaster right from the start. It started going wrong when the casting people sent the wrong person over to me to take molds of. And at this point, I'm so far along in production trying to do what I've been contracted to do. And the opportunity to get the right actor and do a full impression and everything else, there was literally hardly enough time. So I finally ended up where the only way I could fit it into my schedule was to try and do it as an actual build-up on the person in the makeup room that we had established on the set of the soundstage in Burbank. Needless to say, it was not the ideal way to do it. The end result was really not ideal in any sense.
The Yellow Man. I'm laughing because it was a photograph of the way the Yellow Man was first presented to us. And it's my exhibit A as to why we needed another makeup guy.
Insofar as my leaving the production, I would like to clear up a silly rumors that I've seen that float around the internet. There's an astonishing number of false rumors. I've actually seen it written where I was supposedly removed before principal photography. That's false. I was 3 weeks into the 6-week shoot. Actually, we were halfway done filming when I was actually removed from the production. It came to a head on the day where somebody grabs a fire axe or something like that and smashes it down on someone's head. And what I had to make was to take a real axe and then make a metal band that curves around behind it and bolts to the floor. Dan had storyboarded it and had given that to me originally. Now, so many things had changed all the way through during pre-production and day-to-day on filming that very candidly I wasn't paying attention to the storyboard in building this. And Dan had wanted a certain left-right concept. And the way I had built this curved piece of aluminum that will hold the axe and bolt to the floor was the opposite. He wanted left, I had built it right. And as much as I recall, that was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. That was it, where he said, Munn's fucked up, that's it, he's got to go.
Norman Rockwell talks about stepping into the picture when you do an illustration, and Bill Munns did not step into the picture. He did not make that world real enough. He did the minimum of what was required of him and no more. And I wanted someone who would go the distance and just put their heart and soul into it and deliver with the same passion that I had for the film. Bill got fired and we immediately brought in Kenny Myers.
They had been up for at least a couple of weeks, I think. And I got a call on a Friday about noon, kind of out of the blue. They said, would you come talk to us? And I said, well, where the hell are you and who are you? Literally. And they said, well, we're over here in Burbank, blah, 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 blah. And I went, all right, fine. I met Dan O'Bannon, who scared the living hell out of me. Dan says, now here, I want to talk to you a minute. I got this, and this is important to me, and this. And I said, all right, no problem. He said, don't say no problem. Well, I left my skin and jumped back 4 feet. And he says, that other guy says no problem. And I said, okay, we'll handle it. The makeups on the show were not going the way they wanted. And I must say now that I'm an older goof in the industry, that for years I used to slam Bill Munns over this. And in reality, that isn't fair. And I'll say that now out loud. You know, they tried to do what a lot of producers do, which is, we haven't got money to do it right because we don't want to spend it. So we'll give you a third of that, and when you foul up, then we'll bring in somebody else to fix it. This is the stupidest process I've ever seen in the world, but that's exactly what they followed. So they probably gave him a quarter and asked for a $5 piece, and when it failed, huzzah, why, you must suck.
I know that I did as well as a person could under the circumstances. If there was more budget, if there was more time, if there was a different director, everything would be very, very different.
I had borrowed my parents' RV, and we got permission to park it out front of the studio, and we all lived in it for a couple of weeks, working around the clock. We actually started from a list of the gags as they were coming up and read the script as we had time behind prepping the gags, one of them being the yellow corpse. Yep. Howard Berger had been working on the head of the yellow corpse, I believe for the saw-off sequence. So I went over there and met him for what I think was the first time, got the head from him, and we were able to do sections of the yellow corpse sequence, and some of it was horrific. But we had to look the other way. It was the only way to keep the camera rolling. Meanwhile, we were able to build other pieces that could be filmed later on, like the headless puppet that went over.
Yeah, that was Larry.
That was Larry O'Dean and his marvelous talents, sculpting all night long and then molding. Craziness. I remember I said, all right, tell me about this Tarman thing. And we had a PA that was helping us, and they brought us the Tarman in a box. The suit was a leotard with slip rubber drips glued onto it. And when you picked it up, the weight of the drips just stretched the leotard to nothing. So we had to completely rebuild the bodysuit, and then the drip idea was okay. It would work in a dark environment, so I believe we went with it.
Yeah.
And we made some more pieces, and then we sewed it all on, and the suit was constructed in such a way that it would hold that weight. And then I think we mechanized the mask, made
Yeah.
new eyes.
Yeah, I did that.
You did that.
Kenny did a very capable job on the show. It's my understanding on the Tarman character that he did modify the face, and he did put some animation into it. I think he made the brow move. I think he rigged something in the cheeks.
The look of the zombies on the film were different, but that's simply because there was no money.
It was rushed.
It was a bit rushed.
Yeah, it was like if there was a seam or something showing, we had this thing, either cover it with blood or what was the green mulch stuff?
We had moss.
Moss, yeah, either cover it with blood or moss, and they're good to go.
It's funny because it was a very small family, and rather than have to go get a lot of extras and make them into zombies, we would turn each other into zombies. We're all in the film one way or another. Brian Peck, who is a Mr. Plastic Face, we would glue down his mohawk because he played Scuzz, and we would use Brian over and over and over again, changing his face all the time, making him a different zombie.
I was so into horror movies, and I was so into the makeup effects, and I was so into the special effects, and I was so into so many aspects of the filmmaking that I really stuck my nose where it didn't belong. And thankfully, Dan did not bristle at my eagerness to participate in every single department except maybe craft services, and allowed me to, come in on my days off. And I mean, by the time the movie was over, I had played several different zombies. I had puppeteered special effects. I had come in and I literally helped spray yellow smoke around the set. I mean, I basically would do, whatever they wanted me to do on the film.
Months later, after the film had wrapped, it was time to do pickups. There were lots of little things that they wanted to add. And one thing was a body crawling up through the earth to reach the surface. And because I had then become very fast friends with Brian Peck, I said, come on up, we're going to shoot inserts. We'll make you into the crawling zombie. And we had a big, long box filled with vermiculite and dirt and all kinds of other nasty stuff. And when Dan arrived, Brian turned around and he could see his face, and he went, of course. We used a lovely actor who was born without legs, and he built wheelchairs, fast ones, for a living. And when he recovers and then falls forward onto his hands and then picks his torso up and walks away, it was a powerful moment for me because it just looked, you didn't expect it.
It's creepy.
It was creepy.
Yeah, very unsettling.
In a word, it was creepy. We were shooting the melting corpse in the barrel that would become the Tarman. We had cut a large opening in the barrel to make the heads melt. And we used what they call a torpedo heater. It's about that big around an opening, and they're about that long. And that was how we were going to deliver heat to the wax that was the face. And Dan was here, and in fact, we shot it in this studio. And we fired up this heater and put it in the opening, and the wax started to go. And Dan would go, faster! And I would push it, I'd go a couple inches closer. And he'd go, faster! And I'd put it a couple inches closer. He'd go, faster! So I got pissed, and I grabbed the thing and I rammed it right into the opening of the barrel. And now the flame was in contact with the Pyrex glass and so close to the head that the hair that's punched into the head went up in flames and the glass cracked, and that's exactly what they cut on for the opening sequence.
Watch your tongue, boy, if you like this job! Like this job!
Dan was a singularly driven man. He knew what he wanted, and that's really helpful to an artist on a show. When a director knows what he wants, there's no
Really makes our job easier.
Yeah, there's no gray area. That's what you build to. But he had a wicked sense of humor. He had a wicked temper, and you never knew what you were going to get or how innocent a question. If it was a trigger word to Dan, come in low, keep your head down, have an exit plan.
Look at it. Feels very.
One of my favorites is the half corpse, the woman who gets cut in half and then is strapped to a gurney, and then she begins to speak to the other characters in the film and tell them what it's like to be a revivified corpse. I designed it. It was built by Tony Gardner.
You make sure it's tied right.
When Return of the Living Dead was made, I was actually in college. A friend of mine who was in college, Brian Peck, who was very preppy, very collegiate looking, had been cast for the part of Scuzz, playing a punk rocker, and felt that he looked too all-American, and he wanted crooked teeth. So me being the weird college student that made weird stuff in my dorm room, I made him some teeth. He wore them to a rehearsal with Dan O'Bannon, and Dan really liked them and said, I'd really like to meet your dentist friend. I happen to have some photos of a dead body I was building on my own, in my own time. I just started working for Rick Baker. I was trying to go to college at the same time. I had just finished Thriller, was figuring I could walk away from school for a little while. Met Dan, and he offered me the job doing this half corpse because the company that was building it for him was having financial problems. A company that did characters for amusement parks and theme parks and kids' restaurants and stuff. It was an animatronic speaking, robot that was completely motor controlled. And it was coming up to the due date, and production wasn't seeing anything from them, and the company was having some financial issues. So they started to get a little bit worried. So when Dan saw this picture of basically this dead female that I was building with long blonde hair, he just kind of went, oh, this is kind of along the lines of what I need. So I kind of waltzed into it as the teeth guy and ended up being the half corpse guy.
Why do you eat people?
Not people, brains.
I was just trying to give it as much life as I could because I knew it was tied down, so I could use that to my advantage as far as not needing to make the arms do anything. And one of the hands, I was trying to mechanize both the hands, but you're playing beat the clock, So in the end, the hand that we didn't get as far as I wanted, put a rope across the hand so just the fingers move. The other hand was free to do whatever. But it's like this spine's hanging out with nothing to do. So I thought I'd put a vinyl tube down the middle of it so that I could keep all the pieces, all the sections of bone connected. And then I could have some sort of spinal fluid leak out of that. I operated the head and the eyes, and Brian Peck, who played Scuzz, operated the jaw. And it seemed like a no-brainer. It's like, okay, here's Brian. He can memorize the dialogue and actually do a performance. Let him do the jaw and talk to all the other actors that he knew.
That was one of those situations where obviously who was ever operating the mouth had to do the dialogue as well to time it out with Don Calfa. So Tony was just like, Brian, come here, you operate the mouth and do the dialogue. So there are some bootlegs of the rough cut of the movie that you can find at some horror conventions. And in that version, you can hear me,
The pain of being dead.
And then pass the spine and the spinal fluid off to Bill Stout.
I'm a very hands-on production designer. I love to just get in there. I'm on the set every day, and I love to get in there and do stuff.
Dan liked it a lot. He really enjoyed it. He was supposed to actually have a nightgown on, and when he saw it, he was like, oh, let's lose the clothes. And there was this big debate, can you show a zombie's nipple in an R-rated movie, and it's going to be on screen for this long, and it was hilarious. Apparently, if you are rotting and your aureola is the same color as your skin, you're allowed to show your nipple R-rated American film. But he enjoyed it a lot and figured that he had gotten somebody that could be a participant in the storytelling of the movie as opposed to just a prop.
Eating brains. How does that make you feel?
The fact that the half-corpse is the one that explains zombies eat brains to make the pain go away. She sort of launched a whole take on why zombies do what zombies do, which it's kind of cool to be a part of. There's actually 2 bodies. I built a full body that comes through the window that separates in half. And it was sculpted with the mouth open in sort of this big, exaggerated screen. Brian basically had to puppeteer it by his actions. And then Kenny Myers had actually made a plate that attached to Brian's head on the off-camera side of his mohawk that had the tube with a nozzle that sprayed all the blood. And then Kenny Myers did a wound after Brian lands, where it's sort of like the aftermath of the bite, basically.
Damn, he's dead. Shit. Here's something you don't see very often. You're a privileged person. These are split dogs.
Oh, I ended up with the split dogs, too. How could I forget that? I thought my responsibilities expanded enough going from dentures to the half-corpse.
I gave him a picture, I think it was from the Carolina Biological Supply Catalog, to work from.
It's basically been buzzsawed down the middle, and it needs to come alive. So I went in with, I was like, all right, sure, okay, I'll do the half dogs. And, they're like, oh, we want the legs to move, we want it to breathe, and we want it to pant. And it's like, oh, okay. I ended up furring the dogs, I remember, at home in my kitchen. It's cable housing and fishing line. I'm literally laying on the floor next to it, pulling these rings on the ends of these cables. And it worked out fine. I think the fact that it was a terrier made it all the more awful that they're beating it to death again.
When the tactical nuclear weapon, the explosion goes off, there's no even optical in that. It's all an in-camera, multiple scale shot. We built a backyard, and then beyond that, not too far out, was the skyline of the city. And then in between there, I had an air cannon set up.
I was there when they shot the nuclear bomb at the end, and even though the blast was across the street, I was standing by the front door, and this heat wave that because it was like a little alcove, and so there was nowhere, so all that heat just came rushing at us and just hit us, and it was really spectacular.
Around the base, I had him put fast flash, which blinds you when it goes off. It's quick. It just, and then this fireball would start up, and then a much bigger one with more gasoline plowed up through the center of it, and then another behind that, but they were all so close. It appeared like one explosion, but you ended up with a mushroom cloud. And it was all set up with this electronic firing device that I had built for the first Terminator, to do that tanker truck explosion at the end of the first Terminator. Jim, in his discussions I had with him, he and I talked about Arnold's arrival, and then at the end, when he got smashed, that there was going to be all this electrical activity, and he did not like, and I've never liked, drawn electrical lightning bolts and all of that, because almost always, it's not impossible to make it look real, but it's incredibly difficult. And what you've seen in most movies look like cartoons. And so I went up in Laurel Canyon, I forget the guy's name, but he had the old Frankenstein Tesla coil that was used in the 1931 movie. And I went up there on a Saturday alone with one of my cameras and set up in his garage with the Tesla coil and blacked it in. And I shot the 1,000 foot at different frame rates, and both the bolts shooting out and the Jacob's ladder ran up.
And so I did some sort of a rotomat for the clouds. And the lightning burst was actually the Tesla coil lightning from Terminator.
It was one of the roughest films I've ever made. I actually quit the film business for 9 months after that. It was such a brutal experience, which is funny to me now because when I travel with the cast, they all have these rose-colored glasses, these cheerful remembrances of what it was like. I'm thinking, were you on the same film as me?
I have to say, honestly, it's one of the favorite film experiences I've ever had. I love the movie as a movie. I loved everybody that I worked with. I had a good time doing it. I realized that even under really stressful conditions, it can be a lot of fun. And it really quite often comes down to who you're working with.
Dan was in charge, and you felt that, I think, all the time. Yet there was a pot of creativity. You were welcome to say something. If he didn't like it, he'd dismiss it. If he did, he'd talk about it or say, ooh, let's try that. I think that helped make the show what it was.
I would say this film accounts for maybe 1% of the totality of my career. And I think it would be very, very fair to say it was a low point. You know, I certainly would not characterize it as a high point of my career. But I honestly thought when I wrapped it up, I said, okay, fine, the film will come out. It'll play for 3 weeks, going to VHS in 2 months, and people will forget about it, and I'll forget about it, and I'll move on, and people will move on. And I honestly do not know why this film has the following that it has. I know it does. I have been asked to do more interviews on this particular project than everything else I've done in the film industry combined.
I'm amazed at how well that film holds up. I enjoy it every time I see it. I think it's extraordinary that every time they have a screening in Los Angeles, it's a sellout. The place is packed. They have to turn people away. It's gone way beyond what I thought it would ever do. I've been a guest at conventions that are solely devoted to that one film, and it's really gratifying when a lot of people come up to me and they say, you know, that's my favorite movie in the entire world.